Services of the Government of Jersey. I first want to take an opportunity to apologise to the public for the late start of this hearing, which was due to some security issues, but we are now ready to go. So welcome. I'd like to draw everyone's attention to the following, if I may. As you all know, this hearing will be filmed and streamed live. The recording and transcript will be published afterwards on the State's Assembly website. If I could ask for all electronic devices, including mobile phones, to be switched to silent. And I'd ask that for any members of the public who intend to join us, there is nobody in the room at the moment, but we would ask them not to proceed, to interfere in the proceedings, and as soon as the hearing is closed, to leave quietly. And for the purposes of the recording and the transcript, I'd be grateful if everyone who could speak could ensure that you state your name and role. If we can, I'd also like to just draw attention to the statement that I'm required to make in relation to scrutiny panels, which states that the proceedings of the panel are covered by parliamentary privilege through Article 34 of the States of Jersey Law 2005 and the States of Jersey Powers, Privileges and Immunities Scrutiny Panels PAC and PPC Jersey Regulations 2006. And witnesses are protected from being sued or prosecuted for anything said during hearings unless they say something that they know to be untrue. This protection is given to witnesses to ensure that they can speak freely and openly to the panel when giving evidence without fear of legal action, although the immunity should not be abused by making unsubstantial statements about third parties who have no right to reply. And the panel would like you to bear this in mind when answering the questions. If we can begin with introductions, I'm the chair of the panel for today in the absence of Deputy Gardner. My name is Deputy Karen Wilson, and if I could pass over to other members of the committee to introduce themselves also. And if I'd like to start with Deputy Christina Moore, who is the Vice Chair of the panel, who is currently online. Christina?
Hello, thank you very much for joining us. The Vice Chair has just been explained that he's
Okay, and then if I could start with...
My name is Ali Awan. I'm one of the lay members of the committee.
Deputy David Wall, I'm a panel member.
Vijay Kakria, a lay member.
Glenn Kehoe, lay member.
Deputy Raluca Kovac, member of the panel.
Philip Taylor, lay member.
And in attendance in Hammond, Controller General.
Thank you. And if I could ask officers to introduce themselves, and if you could, would you be kind enough to also just give an overview of your expertise and your experience in the roles that you hold?
Okay, shall I start? Good afternoon, Jason Whitfield, Chief Information Officer. My experience, my career is in information technology, digital services, over 30 years. I'd summarise it as the first third with software engineering, so building systems and implementing and integrating corporate IT. I moved on to lead an enterprise architecture and IT strategy team in the financial services. Second third of my career was in public sector, focusing on IT strategy, enterprise architecture and sourcing, strategic sourcing. And then the last third that I'm in now, leadership roles. So this is my fourth Chief Information Officer role in the industry.
Thank you.
Would you like me to introduce
Yes,
myself?
You too.
Caroline Hastings. I've been in procurement for 40 years. Started my career in the police back in Devon and Cornwall and worked on many national procurements as part of that role. Led some very significant procurements, Microsoft being the first biggest one for the whole of the police estate across the whole of the UK. And led a number of teams in that role. And then I came to Jersey in 2006 as the first commercial services director. It wasn't called that at the time, but that's the role it was. And set up a small team there and worked in that role for until 2012, 14, 19 years ago, I don't know so quickly, 2019. And then I went to work on the ITS programme as the commercial lead and led that procurement. And then recently gone back into the director's role and been in that role for a year and a half, more or less.
Thank you.
Ruth Galloway. I'm the Head of Business Enablement and Customer Support for Digital Services. I've been in government for around about 18 years. I've had a varied government career. In the last 4, I've been with what's now Digital Services. My team looks after frontline IT services and also the governance aspects of the stuff that we do.
Great, thank you very much. Just like to draw your attention to the fact that we do have an hour, and I know it's going to run over because of the late start, so we should aim to finish by 2:15. And there will be a few areas of questions which will be shared between all of us. Okay, so I will start off. Excuse me, obviously this hearing examines IT procurement practices of the Government of Jersey, addressing previous shortcomings identified in official reports and hearings. And what we're hoping to do sorry, is to explore the improvements made, the current challenges and the future plans. Thank you. What we know is that digital procurements have shared characteristics with major government procurements, but added complexities make them even more pivotal. And that was a comment made by the National Audit Office. Government's approach to technology supplies addressing the challenges on the 16th of January 2025. An overarching IT strategy for the government is under development and due to be finalised later this year, June 25 being the estimated completion. Excuse me. What we'd like to learn today is what lessons you've learned from previous digital initiatives and how these will be incorporated into the IT digital strategy that will be finalised in June. If you could start, Jason, please. Excuse me.
Thank you, Chair. It's a very wide question. Lynn's recent report on the IT think piece has been helpful because it's gone back 10 years with investments in technology-dependent programmes. I think for me, personally, one of the top headings is project and programme management. Some of the shortcomings, some of the issues, some of the things that Lynn's reports have been calling out is not best project management. Managing to scope, managing to quality, managing to timelines, reporting, and ensuring the right skills. Also, lackings in what I would call stakeholder management, so the business change component, not just the pure technology component. As a result of that, as part of the IT strategy work that I'm leading, we're looking at where our skills base is and where we need extra skills in that space in the new department's name, Digital Services. The second area is what I think is previously referred to as overtrading. When I took over the department, we had some issues. I led a health check that I've talked about in previous sessions. So the health of the department, the health of the systems. And we discovered in totality we were leading over 300 projects for the government. So we went through quite an extensive exercise with Ruth's team across all the departments, and each department helped us prioritise their needs and priorities. And as mentioned before in previous hearings, we reduced the totality of, it was actually 330 projects that we were accountable for, down to 100, to give us the space, the capacity and the focus. In other words, the challenges of some of the projects is that the resources were spread too thinly because there was too much change going on within our own team, and then also the resources on the island. Very important, obviously, we focus on that. So prioritisation has been really key. The third area for me would be standards and policies. We've got a way to go in the department to document all the IT standards and policies that you need for the complexity of the state. Believe it or not, for a small island of Jersey, we have 1,000 systems, 1,000 applications, business systems. That's quite complex to run and maintain. So when you have change projects come along, they have to be tested thoroughly. Documentation needs to be brought up to date. So the strategy is now looking at the lesson learned, particularly from Lynn's report, is how we simplify, how we reduce that complexity, how we have less systems, which also leads to less suppliers, because we have a large number of suppliers providing all of that IT and technology.
Okay.
That's my summary level response.
Okay.
But it is a very broad question, so happy to take further detail to that theme.
I mean, I think the question is what will be incorporated into, what learning will be incorporated into the final IT strategy based on what you've just talked about there. What is the biggest learning point that you must not repeat in terms of producing another strategy?
Not taking on too much, focusing on very clear set of priorities aligned to government needs, so that we have the right level of resources on the projects and we deliver what the projects expect. That would be my short version.
Okay, so there's a big issue around overtrading, as you talked about. Can you tell us what caused repeated delays to the overarching IT strategy?
I've read about this and thought about it quite a bit, particularly with the Think Piece report, which catalogues it painfully. I've only been in role just over a year. I would suggest it's simply down to overtrading. That when you have that many projects, that many issues, that many escalations, and those large number of operational systems, things happen. Maintaining and managing that sort of IT complexity is a complex business. Things go wrong. We had plans to make some advances on our strategy in Q4 last year, and we had some quite complex operational incidents that required most of the focus of my leadership team. So just bandwidth for it. It's taking longer than we expected.
Do you think it's going to be ready by June 2025?
That's absolutely our intent and plan. We have the right members of my leadership team focused on it. We have workshops booked. We have milestones. We have all the things in place. But what I can't predict is things going wrong operationally for it. So I'll touch wood. As long as we have no major operational issues on our systems, then I'm confident we'll be publishing at the end of June.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move over to Deputy Moore now, if I might. Christina, could you take over?
Thank you. It is good to hear that you have already acknowledged the work of the Controller and Auditor General. I was just going to briefly read from one of her recent think pieces on this subject, in which she stated, "I recognise that the government has undertaken an exercise to prioritise IT projects for investment as part of the proposed budget. The prioritisation and reprioritisation of projects and programmes in the absence of a coherent overarching vision and strategy, however, creates increased risks that projects and programmes will be implemented in a suboptimal way and may not deliver intended benefits to citizens." The prioritisation, could you explain, please, how your prioritisation process has been worked through without having that overarching strategy under which to guide it?
Thank you, Deputy Moore. So sometimes I think there's some confusions across the government on an IT project, a digital project, a technical project, and a business change programme. The majority of those 102 projects are business change projects. So, for example, changes to our tax systems because of refinements to the law or our tax policies. I say that because the majority of the 102 projects has been prioritised by departments. So if a department has a new set of processes, something changing, and they need a new document management system or a new customer relationship management system, then within the realms of that project, the architects that work for me in digital services will engage in the planning and then in the procurement processes and architect and design a solution for that project and program. The best example is the Transform program, where there's been a very comprehensive planning, strategy and architecture exercise with procurement. So the strategic planning is done within the sphere of the programs and the projects, as opposed to there's one master blueprint for all 102 projects. To say it a different way, the technology needs for the prison are very different from the technology needs for the Treasury with the tax systems. However, there is some commonality, which is why the IT strategy is important, which is the underlying infrastructure. So, for example, how we use Microsoft technologies, which is one of our core foundations, both on the end user side, on the server side, and on the database side. So the architects, as they work with the large programs or the smaller projects, are taking a strategic approach. Because it's not all written down in a well-summarised, very clear strategy, I can understand why that gives the impression there's not strategic planning going on. And my assurance to the committee is these large investments are taken very strategically, and the role of the architect, the principal designer for the solution, their role is to ensure that and guide that. We also have an assurance process called MERS, that as projects progress through their stages, we're providing verification assurance the projects are following the strategic path and alignment with published IT policies, for example.
Thank you for the answer there. I think perhaps we may be seeing a slight difference in approach, which might be guiding the approach. In an earlier answer, you stated that priorities are according to government needs. But what about the needs of the public and their interaction with the digital platforms of government? We've seen just recently Guernsey has published their digital strategy, which identifies an overarching.
And for the businesses that these projects help enhance or improve is driven by the departments and by the chief officers that made those decisions on priorities. I can think of a few that are very much about improving citizen needs. For example, our digital government platform is about improving our online services to citizens. It's not as good as it could be, and I've received some criticism since I've been in my role. But in the main, it's the departments and the ministers that are sponsoring those projects and programs that are deciding on the citizens' needs and citizens' priorities. In other words, this strategy that we're developing is not for a greenfield site. It's an optimization strategy of where we are. If the government had taken a decision, which I wouldn't have encouraged, to replace all of our systems and wipe things out, which sometimes happens, then it would have needed a far more centralised approach to the needs of the citizens. So this is an incremental strategy. This is a how do we optimise what we have with our current systems, and how do we need to improve things in an incremental way, as opposed to some revolutionary strategy to replace everything, replace all our systems.
If I could just come in, Christina, I think one of the questions aligned to that is, in the optimisation approach, is that still going to deliver the benefits to islanders in terms of what's in the mix at the moment? And will there be any gaps in that where strategically you're going to have to make some decisions about how to fill those gaps going forward?
Well, that's a good question. From my career experience, that depends on the success of the projects and the programmes, which is why in the first question I emphasised the importance of project and programme management skills and the governance of projects and programmes and the assurance of projects and programmes. In other words, the strategy, if it's sensible and it's balanced and the funding comes with the strategic change plan, that's not necessarily going to direct benefits being realised. Benefits being realised come from the projects and the programmes, also the importance of the SRO role, and what happens when the project's finished. The other thing I'd add in my experience is when the system's been built or modified under a digital and IT project, the benefits tend to flow in the 1 or 2 years after with process optimization, cultural change, efficiency. The business change has to follow on after, which is why benefits realisation and benefits tracking is all of our roles in departments when we're investing in these projects. Very rarely does a large IT project, IT programme, deliver benefits on day one that the system goes in. It normally takes at least a few years after. So I can't guarantee the benefits will come because we're reliant on the projects and the programmes that will deliver the change programme. But my intent is to focus more on project and programme management skills and how those programmes are governed and ensured.
Can I just ask a quick question, please, Chair?
Yes.
What is the strategy expected to achieve? Strategies normally have an aim, a vision they're trying to achieve. Could you articulate that for me in fairly simple terms?
Number one, to look at solutions to simplify our complex IT estate, because it's too complex. Number two, to find quick ways to replace some of the older systems. We have quite old systems that are costly to maintain, take a long time to change as a result. Number three, to keep our island safe, so our technology and our systems as secure and safe as they should be. And number four, as cost efficient as possible, so making sure we're getting good value for money. Technology is an expensive game, don't need to explain that to you. For it, they would be my 4 simple ones off the top of my head.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Before we pass on to Deputy Ward, could I just ask briefly if you could confirm whether digital IT is built into any of the programmes that are currently prioritised and or underway, please?
Do you mean, Deputy Moore, by question, changing the digital ID processes, or do you mean the existing systems like Jersey, Me, and what's the other one, Ruth, that we have? Yoti. How do you mean by your question, Deputy Moore?
By providing each member of the public with one digital ID so that they can easily interact with services.
So, to my knowledge, Ruth might need to help me here, there's not any projects in the prioritised list that mandates a digital ID for all islanders.
Correct.
For it. So that's the first part of the answer. The second is digital government platform project and programmes are optimising the platform that we have for that. So the usage, the indexing, but we're not actually changing the underlying use of Jersey, Me and Yoti from an optimisation perspective. Does that help your question, Deputy Moore?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I'll let Deputy Ward.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Who holds ultimate accountability for digital procurement decisions across departments, and how is this communicated? How do you ensure that there is consistency in these processes if they are managed by individual SROs?
So the procurement, so the requirements that come in from digital projects.
Could you speak a little bit, please?
Sorry, I've got a very quirky voice.
Do you want to move your microphone a little
Yeah,
bit?
thanks. So in terms of procurement across the departments, then there's a bidding process, obviously, in terms of business case preparation. And that will be reviewed by either Jason's team or a combination of myself, strategic finance. So there's a business case that has to be prepared, and that goes into some sort of prioritisation. In terms of procurement, it will depend on the value of the project, and some of you, I think, will already be familiar with the process we have in terms of the different categories of spend. It requires different types of procurement activity. So the more expensive ones, which tend to fit into the digital space, would require tendering. And if it's a bespoke piece of software, it may require an exemption to not bid the work. But generally, all IT projects, as if all projects actually, and all requirements in terms of procurement, should follow that process, which is set out in the Public Finance Manual, its law, and the sourcing routes are set out clearly in the documentation. And we will support those. Some departments are more self-sufficient than others, can do more of that work. Other areas of the business, it's more complex and we require specialist skills, which I work with, we work together to determine whether we have the skills in-house or whether we need to bring in external third parties to support, which may be individuals with a particular expertise or businesses, suppliers. And then we will follow the same route in terms of supplier relationship management, contract management, and ensuring that the delivery is as we wanted it to the quality and standard.
Yeah, it does. Just a quick question. You mentioned about this sort of unevenness in expertise in departments. I mean, that's just how it is? I mean, can you give an example where should they all have a certain level of expertise, or can you give an example maybe why would you expect expertise here in this area as opposed to that area?
I think it's kind of organic. So this is happening over time. And we've gone from so in some areas, some of the departments have grown their capability and skills, and perhaps they're not in such a complex area, such as digital, for example. So they may be buying more routine goods and services, and therefore it's simpler for them to do.
Could you just give us an example of
Yeah.
that?
In the digital space, it has to fit with all the requirements and standards that are set by Jason and the team. So they can't just go and buy some random piece of software.
Department. Can you give an example of a real-life department?
I can talk about education, actually, who have done a really good piece of work to procure a website that helps direct learning, and I can't remember the name of it, sadly. But they worked out, this was with Highlands, their requirement needing to be more digitally aware and to provide a service to the students. And they provided a very good, capable requirement, and we had a very light touch in that in terms of it went through the number of gateways that we would expect. It met certain standards. And
So give me the good one.
Yeah.
What about the bad one?
Bad one. I can't recall the bad one.
We all like to hear. Well, that means bad. Well, one where there isn't the capability, or there isn't deemed to be the need for the capability. Sorry to put you on the spot.
I can't think of one at the moment. Honestly,
Okay.
I can't think of
Okay.
one. I can think of where departments have brought in some of their support, and that sometimes needs some refining.
Probably the question is ultimately is why? Why are some behind the others? Is there a strategy to
I think that's probably part of
upgrade
Jason's
everybody?
strategy, isn't it? In a way, because we need to bring. I think there's some at the moment. There's probably some as Jason and the team develop their strategy and standards, which they have standards in terms of Microsoft being a key one. But there are others. If I think about SAP, our implementation of SAP, there's more we could do there. And then the smaller departments will have niche requirements that only their area will use.
Okay.
So it has to be proportionate in terms of the skills and the attention that we put. We've all got limited resources. I've got a very small team.
Sorry, PJ.
Sorry, do you mind if I just ask the question in a slightly different way? This is a procurement review, and I think I heard you say that individual departments create business cases for IT changes or procurements, and they pass them to Jason and yourself, and that you assess those business cases. Did I hear that right?
They, in the IT space, I think Jason might be able to help me with that one. In terms more generally, we would expect departments to produce their business cases, and they would be reviewed.
So how would you, supposing you've got two different random departments, Department X and Department Y, and they've got project A and project B, and you can't do both of those because lack of resources. How do you determine which one you're going to prioritise in that situation?
Well, that would be in consultation with Jason's team, with the chief officer. I mean, in terms of the importance, the risk, the level of risk. So there are a number of considerations that, you know, and if we're going to the strategic projects, then obviously we would be working with the CPMO, who would require them to go through certain gateways.
I think what we're trying to test is what's your evaluation framework? What is your control mechanism for approving or disapproving of a business case? How do we come to understand the decisions you make in terms of what can be procured or what won't be procured?
So there is a business case process which, so a strategic and higher level expenditure, the chief officers are required, it's an accountable officer's responsibility to oversee and make sure that those business cases are presented.
But you are the stopgap, aren't you? You're the one, you're the department that says you can pass go or you can't. So what is it that
We don't pass go. So we don't have that authority to say yes or no. People will submit business cases which will get funding approval, and that's a separate discussion from the procurement. The procurement comes in when that's been agreed, and it's how we go to procurement. How are we going to buy this thing?
We talked about a number here. I think you talked about 300 different projects on the go, and you've got that down to 100. So how did you prioritise that? How did you what the danger I'm hearing here is that we might end up going the other way, where lots of different people say yes, and you can't make your mind up which is yes and which is no.
So each of the chief officers, each department prioritise their projects. Mm-hmm. So the 102 is a sum of the priorities per department.
I understand that.
To the first part of the question on what if we have resource contention, you know, A and B projects need exactly the same skills. I mean, ultimately that will get escalated to me, and then my role would be to resolve with the other chief officers and ultimately ministers if one takes priority over the other. I haven't had that in the time here in my role. Technology projects do depend sometimes on specialists and third parties. So all through my career, I'm used to bringing in expertise on a database technology or a networking or a security. That doesn't actually tend to happen. And then the other part of the question on do we approve the gating part of a business case? So if a project has a technology component and requires technology, even if it's not going to be delivered by our Department of Digital Services, Public Finance Manual says that we must be consulted. So during the business case development and the phase, best practice would be for my architects in my team to be involved in the development on the solution side. But remember, in a business case, it's typically about outcomes. It's about what's trying to achieve. So the systems design is not normally done at that stage. The business case is to get approval from the treasurer and the government planning process for it. So it's not typically till after the business case is approved from a funding point of view, outline business case, then it gets set up as a project and we have architects involved. Then the requirements would be analysed, and that typically is when you then produce a procurement strategy, which is also one of our rules, and we'd engage with Caroline's team. And broadly, in my time in role, that's worked well. I haven't had any major issues on that with the big procurements and the investments that we've been making. And we're just about to conclude the Transform programme, which has gone very well. We haven't quite signed the contract and agreement yet, but it's gone through all the stage gates, and the architects and the team have been involved all the way through, and a specialist from Caroline's area has been highly engaged, and I think it's worked really well.
It has worked.
Jason, sorry, can I just interrupt? You mentioned there that obviously the departments come to yourselves. Do you actually go back out to other departments where a project may line with other departments that you obviously oversee a lot of these different things, or do you just say, well, they want this, they're going to just go to the procurement and that's the line of travel we're going to take? But you do feed that out to others so they can all share in that experience.
Yeah, the short version is yes. Maybe if I could bring Ruth in to this part. So one of Ruth's responsibilities is the business relationship management team. So her team work day to day regularly with each of the department. And where we spot synergies between projects, then yes, we'd go out proactively for it. Ruth, do you want to
I think
pick
there's
up?
not very much more to add. So we would look to, if we think about this SAP platform as an example, we'd look to make sure that we're reusing as many of those components as possible. And the architects are absolutely key in that process. The business relationship managers are there within their departments understanding the specialism. So the team that are supporting JHA are clued up on blue light related technology in a way that the team supporting I&E are clued up on regulation related activity.
Okay. All right, we're just
Sorry,
going to move
keep going.
quickly
Yes,
on.
sure, sorry.
Can I just give one more example of your question? We're currently working on a very urgent project for one of the departments, and I'm not going to go into the specifics. And we've spotted that there's some case management technology and functionality that can be reused on another project. And we think that they can be co-developed in coexistence. That will save us money and that will create resource efficiencies. And we've done that proactively for it, but that project's not approved yet. It's going through the final stages, so I'd rather not give the details here because it also will probably have a IT procurement after at some point.
I think members' point is that routinely practiced in that way, or is this something that you've just introduced now in terms of trying to improve the diligence around integration, optimisation?
In my time, predominantly from the architects and my leadership team, yes, it's routinely practiced.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll just ask one more, and then we'll move on. So what collaboration do you have with Digital Jersey? Why have Digital Jersey not been engaged to assist government in developing IT strategies and best practice IT procurement strategies, given the expertise in that area?
I meet regularly with the Digital Jersey leadership team. Myself and the colleagues attend their events and conferences. I've been working very closely quite recently on AI strategy, talking with Tony, their leader. Tony's leading a Ireland AI strategy. I'm facilitating and leading the steering committee for AI and public sector. As to your question, developing the IT strategy, it's about enterprise architecture, it's about infrastructure, it's about cloud and on-prem and data centers. We have the skills in my team. I'm not aware of those skills in Digital Jersey for it, so we're not excluding them. If there's something specific that I haven't been told, please raise it. But we meet very regularly with them. Okay. So I'm a bit confused by the question, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
What have you heard?
I personally haven't heard anything, but I know that this is this has been mooted as an issue.
I think
the other
if I
answer
could just
is
respond to this,
in health.
in the sense, I think it's the question is, and you alluded it to yourself in terms of improving the quality of the project management and the PMO and the expertise and the capacity that you have within government to be able to deliver on things. You talked about overtrading. So given that we've got an arm's length organisation called Digital Jersey, whose expertise is entirely that, what we're trying to understand is what's the relationship between you in terms of actually developing strategic frameworks that benefit the island in terms of the whole sort of digital space that you both engaged in. That's where the line of questioning is coming from.
Okay, so I think it's good. And my other two examples I'll give. My team would like to use more skills on Ireland, and a number of review reports and audits have talked about over-reliance outside of Jersey. So we had a conference I worked in alignment with Digital Jersey on the 21st of January, where we invited in all the leaders of the digital companies on the island, laid out our challenges very, very openly and very transparently, and we got good feedback for that. We explained that we want to set up some innovation councils to get new ideas, new skills from the island, how we work closer with digital companies on the island. Digital Jersey were present at that event, gave some guidance before and some feedback after. The second area is digital health. So there's an ambition, digital health, to have a much more joined up, much more integrated health system across the island, the main four domains. There's a board that I sit on with the IT leaders in HCJ, and Digital Jersey are on that board and very, very engaged in that forum. So I think it's very good, which is why I'm a bit confused by your question.
Good. Well, I'm encouraged. Sorry,
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to pass over to Deputy Baywatch now, please.
We're going to move to the procurement and supplier engagement. So this will be more for Ruth and Jason. What steps have been taken to simplify the bidding process for small, medium-sized enterprises on government IT contracts?
So I think that's probably a Caroline question rather than an us question.
Okay.
So in terms of the bidding process, this again does depend on the value of the contract. So currently the thresholds are anything over £100,000 has to be tendered, and that requires the full reach in terms of going out to tender, open bids, expecting people to return bids and reevaluate them in a structured way. Anything under 100,000 is subject to 3 quotes. Now that threshold has been in place since 2006, and we are doing some work to consider the impact of possibly raising that threshold so that we're making it more proportionate in terms of the activity that needs to be undertaken for a small supplier bidding for work. So instead of anything over 100,000, it may be a 200,000 or whatever. We haven't determined a new threshold yet, but certainly that work is underway within the team. And we've been looking across other jurisdictions of a similar size to Jersey, and also looking at best practice in New Zealand, who are very good at documenting all of their processes and procedures. We've used them as a sort of study in recent times. So we are live to the concerns and some of the issues that have been raised over the last few months since I've been back in this role. And that's one of the first things we're doing, is to look at the thresholds with a view to raising them so that the proportionate effort in terms of bidding for work is more proportionate to the value of the work, if that makes sense.
How do you define an exemption?
An exemption?
Yeah, from that process.
So an exemption from the process, and there are some, so if it's a sole supplier, so there's only one person or one provider, that has to be demonstrated, comes to a board to be decided upon whether that is correct. And then there's a document, you'd expect this, but we have a document for this, which it goes through and is recorded as an exemption for a particular reason. It can be because it's so secret that we can't advertise that we're doing it. So there are a number of different categories which will automatically be exempt. And then there are the borderline cases, which is, have we only got one provider? Is it so urgent we need it right away? We haven't got time to go out. And therefore we're agreeing to do a piece of work quickly. So those are sort of the key areas. Okay. There are others.
What I was saying before, but maybe was for Ruth as well, so would be between the three of you. Are there any specific measures that have worked well for the small, medium businesses, which transpired in better relationship with the clients and what's needed?
I do have one example. I'm going to use the ITS programme for that, which is where, it was the biggest IT project at the time, and I know there are views on the success or not of that programme, but we did engage very early on with the local supply chain in Jersey, and we continue to do that, and we're working more closely with Ruth and her team and Jason to do that, which is evidence of the industry meeting just recently. But through that process, I'm going back to the ITS programme, we did obtain a number of bids an interest from on-island suppliers. We held an event at Digital Jersey, and we had one in Jersey, and we had one in London. And from that, we all managed to set out the requirements. We took feedback from the suppliers, and that helped shape the way we approached the procurement. And we encouraged partnership with some of the bigger, some of the bigger companies that were capable and had experience of dealing with a project of this size or that size. And that relationship actually with a local provider continues to this day, very proactive, and we would like to repeat some of that success in some of the other procurements as I work with Jason and the team going forward.
Thank you. Just another one on between the two of you. How is the division, the role split between the departments, the commercial services and the digital services in the procurement process?
In the procurement process, so we're separate departments within Treasury and Exchequer. So we have one, the Treasurer is our lead,
but as in roles,
in terms of roles, so we don't buy very much procurement. We provide the mechanism to buy things, but we don't spend a lot of money because we don't have money to spend. We're spending departmental money or we're spending project money. So the relationship comes with, if I'm using IT as an example, the requirements, the specification will come from the technical teams and the experts in Jason's area. And then we will decide through the procurement strategy, which I have shared with you some examples of procurement strategies, haven't I, in previous. So the procurement strategy will set out the approach to market, possible entrance to the market, considerations around that procurement and how that should be structured, whether it should be openly tendered, whether we should do it restricted, which means we do a sift through first from a number of different requests that come down to a top 3 or a top 5. And then that is put out, then we manage that process. And the bigger projects, we will have a team that are working on that, procurement expert, financial expert, technical expert.
So the teams coordinate
customer.
to ensure
Exactly.
smooth procurement process.
Together,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
That was a long way of saying that, sorry.
Okay, I'm just conscious of time. We have about 20 minutes left and we've got quite a lot still to get through. So if I can hand over to Vijay, please.
Sure. So we have recently had an example of a joint procurement process with Guernsey, which led to a pretty ordinary outcome. What I like to understand is, how do you set your evaluation criteria such that when you're examining a bid, you come up with a unique, repeatable and objective assessment of the value or the merits or demerits of a particular bid, so that you can carry out an objective assessment?
Okay. Shall I take the question first? Caroline might be able to add to it. So the best practice for a bid evaluation is to have a weighted decision tree. So typically the top 6, 7 domains of the decision, how the decision was made, things like cost, functional requirements, non-functional basis of the company that's bidding. That's defined in the procurement strategy up front of the project. So the procurement strategy would lay out the approach to the bid process, and that's done very much in consultation with Caroline's team. Then the scoring committee. So it's important that you have a wide team with representation from the different domains. So we'd always want, for the larger bids, for example, someone from our financial business partner, making sure that we're looking at the commercials well. From a technical side, the bigger bids, I'd always want one of my lead architects looking at the technology being proposed, be it functional, non-functional side. And then on the commercial contracting side, that would typically be led by someone in Caroline's team in the scoring evaluation. I think the other part, in general in industry, I'm answering this not for Jersey, is to have a good facilitator that facilitates the bid process and makes sure that you bring in a proper committee type approach and you're moving towards a consensus approach. And sometimes that's the project manager, sometimes it's someone from Caroline's team. That just depends on the situation of the project in hand. Anything else to add, Karen?
No, I think that's a 10 out of 10 answer. Thank you,
Okay.
Jason.
I suppose the context of the question is that we had the same set of information sent to Guernsey and to Jersey after a similar procurement strategy had been evolved jointly, and yet we arrived at two wildly different conclusions from the same data. How do you give us assurance that your assessment process is objective and will only come up with one answer? The correct answer, ideally.
Yeah, I think the particular example you're referring to, there may have been other circumstances there. In terms of our approach, we do have a very clear guidance in terms of what's preferred. When I say preferred, what's the usual breakdown between price and quality? And that may vary depending on what you're buying, so and what's most important. So you might want to put a higher weighting on a particular specification and a lower weighting on price, because that's the most important criteria. And so these discussions are really important at the beginning to ensure that we're clear about what's important and where we're placing value. And so typically there are 60-40 split, 60% quality, 40% price. If we believe that that's, the quality is the most important thing because it's a very particular, quality is the most important, and we haven't got lots of options in the sort of requirement. So there does have to be some market knowledge and expertise involved, because if you're not close to the industry, you can get scoring wrong, you can get the weighting wrong, and then of course once that's wrong or is not as optimum as it should be or could have been, then you do run and this is where you need experienced people doing that role, or experienced people actually reviewing what's being prepared as part of the procurement strategy. We review the weighting. Sometimes we challenge the weighting and get it documented as to why a particular procurement is looking to do a 50-50 split. Does that make sense?
Thank you. I guess
some science behind it. Yeah.
Thank you. I guess that leads on to we understand that some of the scoring is done off island, and I guess that must be to address the lack of experience you just mentioned.
I don't think it's lack of experience.
Mm-hmm.
I think the size and the speed with which that programme needed to be completed, and also there was a particular specialism in that particular area, which made it a bit more complex.
Which is a type of experience, I suppose. Could you give us an indication of how much it takes place off island and how much takes place on island? Out of, say, the 102 projects that are undergo right now?
What, in terms of evaluation?
Yes, on island versus off island.
Or in terms of award?
In terms of the scoring?
The scoring, we don't score on island, off island.
You don't? Sorry, my understanding is that some of the scoring takes place off island, that you employ non-island local scorers.
No.
Okay, well, let's move on. That must be a misunderstanding.
I don't understand. I've misunderstood the question.
No,
we don't.
So it's the evaluation panel.
Yeah, no. We may have a contractor who's working for government who happens to be in the UK. Mm-hmm. So that's probably it. But they're contracted for us. They're not some random person who's been asked to.
No, I wouldn't expect you to employ a random for these sorts of purposes. So you do use external contractors?
Occasionally, but they would have been involved in the project. So, for example, we've got some third-party contractors working on a couple of projects in Jason's area, and they may be part of the process in terms of deciding where the weighting sits, but it will be within our guidance of what we expect it to be. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Let's move on. Briefly, do you systematically collect feedback from unsuccessful bidders, and how do you use that feedback?
So that, again, this has come from one of the questions, hasn't it? One of the answers from one of the surveys, which was a very small sample. In terms of feedback, within our guidance and our best practice, feedback is a requirement to unsuccessful bidders. And that should be documented, and the rationale as to why they haven't won the business, and also guidance and some advice or where they have fallen short so that they can improve for the next time. Because we don't want people to keep going around this loop at the same time, repeating the same mistakes, because it's not in our interest and it's a waste of people's time. So we do spend some time, so there is guidance, but that does require people to read it. When it comes to, we provide help occasionally to support feedback, because some people are uncomfortable giving negative feedback. And we do give some guidance as to how that should be done. And hopefully we will want to see people bidding. We don't want to see people put off through the process.
Okay, and you're satisfied that that process is effective?
I would say, because of the feedback we've had, it may not be consistent, and therefore it's not as good as it could be, because it should be consistent and people are getting feedback from across the government.
Okay. One last question from my section. Have you considered publishing a pipeline of future complex projects and engaging with local suppliers earlier to give them the opportunity to address, for example, skills gaps and to understand your requirements better and leave them better placed to bid?
Yes, that's on the horizon, a very short horizon. So we've been working with colleagues in I&E who have a pipeline, and that's quite well developed. I'm using that as a template for other sectors in terms of how we present that, where we present it to the different groups. So the construction hub is one, for example, I'm working with, and we will be providing that guidance, excuse me, to ensure that we've got that capability.
Can the pipeline list be submitted, like published online?
Yes, so that's the plan. Okay. The plan is to publish a pipeline across a number of categories, but that does require us actually working with the business to make sure it's not going to be completely out of date by the time we publish it. So there's some work to be done there.
Thank you, Wendy. Okay.
Yeah, myself, it's, I think this is going to be to yourself, Jason, really. It's about managing supplier relationships. You mentioned earlier today that you were reducing the amount of suppliers. For my context, it's just understanding, is that going to be like a one gov approach to these IT suppliers, or is this still a relationship built within separate departments that have connections into different ones, or are we looking to like pull this into a single authority over who says the suppliers are and are not?
So it's actually both. So let me just explain why I made that statement. So we're definitely not trying to stop and reduce suppliers on island. More than understand that theme and that criticism. What's behind that statement is, of the 1,000 systems, approximately digital service relies on 600 suppliers, which is huge. And you can't professionally supply relationship management that large a supply base. So the goal is to have less and have more strategic relationships, more partnerships for it, as opposed to we have any problems with particular suppliers, just to make the point clear. The majority of those suppliers are managed by digital services, as we manage the majority of the technology estate. There are a few examples, for good reasons, where departments manage their own technology relationships for it. We haven't mandated, made a plan, made any statements across government that those need to be reduced. So I'm leading, from a departmental perspective, the simplification of the 600. That will happen over time, and I don't envisage it being like a one gov and going from 600 to 400 in 12 months. I think it's likely to be a 5-year plan to optimise. Also, for practical reasons, we're in commercial contracts. You can't change things fast overnight.
Yeah, that probably leads on to my next question, which is actually how you're going to monitor the performance and the risks to those ones that you are now going to focus more on rather than the 600, really.
Yes, we want to improve that. It's another reason for the simplification, having more partnerships. So service level agreements, monthly status reports on attainment of those service level reports.
Yeah,
contracts managed on outcomes more than inputs.
Yeah, so you've got some sort of underperformance things that you would actually be able to remove supplies from that process if it was required.
Indeed.
Excellent. Yeah. The other one that I've got there is obviously you've talked about the way that these suppliers are going to be coming together. It's how do you share their performance with other departments, and how's that all working as a relationship between everybody? It's just trying to understand that mechanism that's in place and those monitorings that go on. Maybe this is for yourself, Ruth.
It's probably a Caroline. Sorry.
I'll just try and talk, yes.
Yeah.
Jason's going to talk for me, and I'll just butt in if I think it's different.
So majority of those contracts, those relationships, are 600 are managed by digital services. So we don't actually have a plan to report back to departments' performance unless there's a significant exception. So frankly, if a service provider is failing and normal management escalation procedures don't course correct, then it's natural part of the way we work to bring in the department. Typically, for each of the system, there's a business system owner, so you'd actually have an individual manager to go to, and it'd be very clear. But no plans, no intent to publish a great big scorecard and share it across government. Also, I don't believe that's right from a business ethics perspective, because things go wrong, mistakes happen, individuals sometimes let companies down. And recently I had an example of a situation which was quite disappointing. I raised it to the Chief Operating Officer of the company. He absolutely wasn't aware. He was quite shocked when I told him about the issues and the incidents, and we had a really good conversation. And next time that type of service, I don't think we'll have those issues with that company.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Philip?
Okay, thank you, Glenn. If we're going to embark on a project, before we move ahead with it, we're going to have some assumptions about this particular project. Is it technically feasible? Is it within the time scale it can be delivered on? And can it be delivered within the assumed cost? How do you go about assuring that all those assumptions are valid before you award a contract?
Wow, that's a great question. You want to start, and I'll pick up after outline business case.
I was going to say that I think there is a process in place which the CPMO, sorry, the CPMO.
So I suffer from the same problem.
Yeah, so the CPMO manage and have a framework in terms of where these major projects are managed, and there are gateways through those projects. So we do have a process of monitoring at various stage gates.
And I'm talking about before you award it, not while you're doing it.
Yeah, this is why we're doing. That's why it's going on. In terms of the stage gates before it's awarded, then in terms of a procurement process or a tender process, you build in your process certain gateways for passing or failing or not scoring well. So that's in your requirement in terms of the information that you want back from them, evidence that they've provided that they can do this, reference sites. Is that the sort of thing you're looking for?
Do you get independent assurance of any of it from third parties?
Occasionally, yes. Yeah. So occasionally we'll go to a third party, or I'll get someone who's an expert or has got previous experience in a particular area of spend to test whether that's valid or within a tolerance. And there are other organisations we can use, like Gartner we use to run the ITS. There are other organisations that we use to guide us in terms of, what does the industry expect, and does this look in step with that, or are we an outliner? notwithstanding that Jersey has its own, has its own environment, which we always have to take into account as well.
Okay, so we've now got a project which we are comfortable that it can be delivered technically, on time and within a reasonable budget.
Yep.
Then we start off. During the process of implementing that project, how do you make sure that the deliverables are going to be delivered and the cost is actually going to be what we originally thought it was going to be during the process?
Yep.
Because it's no good having a project that don't deliver the benefits you assume you're going to get.
Yeah, so you'd set up, well, if I take one particular project I have in mind, we set up, there were a number of people involved in the management of that whole procurement. So we obviously had the plan in terms of when things should happen. So we've selected our provider. We've got some key performance indicators that we're expecting them to work towards. We've got some key deliverables. We've got some quality measures. And all of those are measured in sort of a balanced scorecard. So we're measuring all of those across the piece. And then overarching that, there is typically a project board. And overarching that, there's probably an SRO who's responsible for the overall delivery of that project, expecting regular reports on progress, deliverables, are they meeting their targets to the standard? Have we got the right people doing the right things? And then there's the stage gate reporting. So if it's a project that sits under CPMO, then they're required to report formally to the CPMO and the status of the project. And if there are any red flags starting to be flagged, then interventions can be put into place to either bring the project back on track, recognise that there's been some unforeseen event which is understandable and can be recognised, and it's not just poor performance on a number of people's parts or programme being overwhelmed by business as usual work, and that reporting actually goes to the chief exec. So we've got a process of through the CPMO. I'm talking on behalf of Lizzie, who's not here today, in terms of the CPMO, and in terms of from a procurement perspective. And obviously we will have built into our terms and conditions and the requirements of the specification certain remedies if they are falling short. So it requires good contract management.
So we're halfway through a project and it's quite likely that this project is going to overrun unless there's radical changes made to it. Mm-hmm. Or it may not deliver what we thought it was going to deliver unless we make some radical change. So who says stop? Put that right before we move forward to the next stage.
I think
To the SRO.
it's the SRO.
SRO.
Yeah.
You can't just carry on with
SRO,
these.
if it's a large programme, which it typically is with that type of challenge, then there's a board, and the SRO would typically be the chair of the board, and the board would make that formal decision. I'd also draw you back to my answer at the beginning about the importance of project and programme management skills. So all across the process, the structure, the frameworks that Caroline's just talked to, well-managed projects that deal with scope issues or timing issues is down to the skills of the project programme management, and vice versa in the challenging situations.
So in the business case, does that include all the sort of life cycle costs that will come through on licensing, maintenance, updates? All that's built into the original business case
Yes,
for
it
the
should
project?
be. Yes, it should be.
And in stages, so the first stage is a high-level case, then we have a formal process outline business case, and then for the larger, more strategic programmes, we have a full business case. So there's a kind of optimism bias in the early stages that should be dealt with contingency, and good project management, good programme management will validate the assumptions all the way through and the stage gating, and good project and programme management will take it back to the board and back to the SRO. We're late, we've got a risk, we've got a blocker, help us make a decision and halt. And then, as you know, there's three main levers you have to what do you do in that situation.
Okay.
And occasionally, that has to be de-scoped. Occasionally, if we've got to a point in the programme where it's clear that we've had overruns, we've had other issues unforeseen, There has to be a decision taken sometimes to de-scope the project.
Okay, I'm going to,
Can I just ask one quick question?
very quickly, because we're
want to
just
pick
5
up
minutes
on
over.
what,
Yeah.
you were saying we've got a well-run programme, we know what's supposed to happen. It doesn't always happen. So what's gone wrong in the past? 3 things have gone wrong in the past. Sorry, Chair, but
That's okay, no, it's
it
important.
seemed a reasonably sensible question to ask.
I refer you to Lynn's report. I mean, in general, we haven't had the best project and programme management. We've over-relied on outside external organisations, in my opinion. Secondly, all of the change at once has been too much. We've been over-trading.
Yeah.
So resources have been spread too thinly. And thirdly, things go wrong in business change, process re-engineering, cultural change, and the interventions haven't happened that we've just talked about. So they're the exceptions. That would be my summary 3 points.
Okay,
But I wasn't here,
oh, no,
so, so we're reflecting and learning from the points.
Okay, that's fine, sorry, thank
Okay,
you.
thank you very much. Okay, we have come to just 5 minutes over our allotted time. I'm going to draw the hearing to a close, but just with one final question, and the remaining questions that we had, we will write to you if you'd be kind enough to respond to those for the purposes of the completing the process of the scrutiny. But do you have a plan for phasing out any unsupported or legacy systems that pose security risks?
Yes.
You do, okay. And can you provide in your response some detail for us around that in terms of what that looks like?
High level.
At the high level, yes.
Yes.
Because across the 1,000 systems, there's a lot of complexity.
Yeah, yeah.
And the strategy work, which will lead on to enterprise architecture work, which will lead on to data strategy and supplier management. There's many, many, many stages and steps. But I don't think it'd be appropriate to publish the list of specific applications, specific projects.
No, it's just basically in terms of the plans that you have, in terms of the way that you would go about actually removing some of those legacy systems and over what period. You don't have to answer it now, but you can.
The IT strategy, when it's published, will describe the framework and the model and the approach, how we'll manage that from a service management perspective. That's what we're articulating in a nice summary report.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Well, thank you. First of all, my apologies for the slight problem at the beginning, trying to speak, but thank you for coming today.